What's the allure of the gang for a young man?
Oh, just money, power, and women. That's what it is. Money, power, and women. And fun. And then go out, you party, and then for recognition, but everyone likes power.
You're listening to Escape from Englewood, Episode 2. I'm your host, Ryan Warner. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. Now, at the end of last episode, we watched Tony Davis, a high school junior at the time, lose in the state finals, suffering his first loss in over 8 years. But even with that loss, Tony was still one of the most recruited wrestlers in the state. Here's University of Illinois head coach Mark Johnson.
I was on Tony's doorstep the first day that recruiting could happen. He was a star in high school, so we usually got the best kids in the state of Illinois. Most every year we got the outstanding wrestler of the state, and he was along that line.
But after Coach Johnson looked into Tony's records, he was forced to move on. Ever since Tony's freshman year, both his academics and his attendance had been in steady decline.
I know toward the junior year, I was calling so much ruckus at Mount Carmel. I was missing school, I had a lot of dress code violations. I wasn't taking advantage of the opportunities I should have been taking care of. I was young. I was immature. I can't blame the coaches. I can't blame my teammates. I had some great coaches, great teammates. I was just making some bad decisions.
But the bigger issue was that Tony didn't see himself as college material.
I had desires to go to college, but I never thought I was capable of going to college. No one in my family ever went to college. So it's like, yeah, I want to do it, but is this a realistic goal? Can this really happen?
And to make things worse, ever since Tony's freshman year, unbeknownst to the wrestling world, he had gotten more involved with the streets.
I just got sidetracked like most people would. I started hanging in the streets, and my brother was a big time kingpin, in Chicago. As my older brother, I started following his footsteps.
Tony's older brother was Michael Davis.
See, my brother Mike was a very smart man, but he was also a very, he was a troubled child growing up. He stayed in trouble, stayed out of jail. But, to me, it was my big brother. I looked up to him. He always showed me love and respect, but I always wanted to be like him in some kind of way because he's my older brother.
On the streets, Tony's older brother Michael gave Tony protection.
It was just word on the street that this is Michael's, Davis brothers. He's quiet. Don't fuck with him. If you do, there's consequences.
Following in his older brother's footsteps, Tony joined one of the largest and most organized gangs in the city.
I heard that Tony had joined the gang, and I was like, no, this is not finna work.
You're hearing from Tony's mom.
I had to stop it because I know if he kept on going, it would lead him into a different direction. And that direction, I didn't want him to go.
But the warning fell on deaf ears. Tony joined the Black Disciples, an organization that had two purposes: sell drugs and defend its turf through whatever means necessary. Tony's job was the former.
It became easy money, easy lifestyle, so I think I got sidetracked through that. At the time, wrestling wasn't bringing me no money. I wanted some new shoes. I like nice clothes. And that's what the neighborhood was offering. It was.
How did they offer that?
Oh, just you had to become a street distributor. That's what they call it, right? We call it. Other people call it drug dealer. A street distributor. I grew up with nothing, so having $100 in my pocket was real money to me. But then you times that by 20 and you got 2,000, 3,000. You're like, damn, that's a lot of money at that age.
As his obsession with the streets grew, Tony showed off his newfound talents to his high school teammate and best friend TJ Williams.
Well, Tony would come to school sometimes and show me a big wad of money. I'm like, whoa, where you get that? Oh man, just doing things. Well, I work at Burger King. I don't make that much money. But, he chose that street life, and it's dangerous. You can make some good money fast. Well, I wouldn't say good money, but you can make some money real fast. But then next week you can be shot and you can be robbed, or, somebody can kill you or your family because you might owe them money or they think you got extra money hiding somewhere. I always told Tony, like, hey, man, you got to stop, man. This don't look good because we know the outcome of these situations because we see it.
By February of 1995, Tony's life continued to spiral. He was a junior in high school and was coming off his loss to Reggie Wright. And in the immediate weeks following that loss, Tony stopped going to Mount Carmel altogether.
I gave those guys a run for their money. I was a headache.
After another week passed without Tony going to class, Mount Carmel decided to expel Tony.
I got a letter in the mail saying, we're not having you come back to Mount Carmel.
The next day at Mount Carmel, T.J. Williams heard the news.
When you left Mount Carmel, I was hurt. I feel like I lost my best friend, right? It was like, I don't get to see him every day. I don't get to hear the stories. I don't get to hear the jokes. I don't get to hear, see a smile or, hey, man, that's Tony right there, And I felt kind of empty. It's like, man, I gotta do this with my other teammates. And no disrespect to them, but it was, like I said, Tony and I, we, thick and thin. And I was worried, like, when I get a phone call of saying, hey, they found Tony. Tony got caught with this, or he's in jail, or they shot him up, or somebody hung him, or somebody cut his body up. And I was like, man, like when you're at school, I can kind of help protect you. But when you're not here, it's like, I don't know what's going on.
After being expelled from Mount Carmel, Tony was forced to enroll in the local public school, Englewood High. And on his first day, he stepped through the metal detectors, and the private school life he had known for the last 3 years was over.
Englewood was a public school, it was a local school. A lot of drugs, a lot of gangs, a lot of violence. I mean, I'm making sure no book is hitting me in the back of my head. I'm making sure when I go down the hallway, no one's going to kick me in my back. It's the grind,
His brother Will, who was just a freshman at the time, remembers Tony's reaction from going from one of the top schools in the city to one of the worst.
Englewood, it was more like him back in the world that he was trying to leave in the first place. Like his thing was like, I'm trying to get out of this neighborhood. I'm trying to move away from all this and get past all this. But like now I'm being pushed back to something that I was trying to get out of the whole time, And then Tony had goals. He was like, man, I want to get out of this neighborhood. And he knew wrestling was something he was good at.
But in the fall of 1995, Tony's senior year, he received more bad news. The IHSA, which is the governing body for wrestling in Illinois, declared Tony ineligible to compete.
When you leave a Catholic school and go to a private school because you take religion classes, they didn't transfer over. So then I became ineligible to wrestle.
The number one recruit in the state of Illinois was officially barred from stepping onto a mat.
I mean, my senior year, I didn't wrestle at all. I didn't touch the mat my senior year.
Shortly after, Tony dropped out of high school altogether.
That's when I was really, really into the streets. And they call it living a vida loca, living a crazy life. And I spent, I was living a crazy life.
Despite protests from his mom,
I was telling him, no, your grades are too good. I think you need to go on to college.
Tony refused to return to high school and doubled down on the streets.
What's the allure of the gang for a young man?
Oh, just money, power, and women. That's what it is. Money, power, and women. And fun. And then go out, you party, and then for recognition, but everyone likes power, so we got power and have people do what you say and you can do what you want and go where you want, it's all for power.
Just a few months prior, Tony was worried about dress code violations at Mount Carmel. But now, as a member of a street organization, he was familiarizing himself with a new set of rules. Here's Tony's younger brother, William Davis.
They give you a page of laws and they say, okay, these are the laws. You read the laws and you got to remember the laws. You got to be able to recite the laws. You got to know them by heart.
In the mid-1990s, Chicago's gangs still displayed a rigid hierarchy and had strictly enforced laws. Failure to follow those laws had real consequences.
For example, like if a gang member stole something from somebody's house, for example, they would take that person and like break that person's arm. Like that person would get their arm broken. Like they would bend their arm over a gate and break their arm.
And if a more serious violation occurred, the gang's response was also more violent.
There could be like no cover-up violations where like basically like you can't cover your face or anything like that. And then like you have like maybe 3 people on one person. If you cover up your face or something like that, or whatever the case may be, then they might extend the time for another 10 minutes because you covered up during that time frame.
These laws may seem draconian, but they help keep Englewood in a state of balance. But then a war broke out between 2 of the largest gangs in the city, and that structure began to erode.
What was supposed to be a lasting truce between rival Chicago gangs is a shambles tonight.
Rumors spread of an all-out gang war. The motive, drug turf. Authorities were able...
Yeah, everyone's fighting for territory. Back then, it was huge.
Gangs were everywhere, man. It was mainly gangster disciples and black disciples, though. On one side of the stoplight is one gang, and on the other side of the stoplight is the other gang. So there used to be shootouts all the time, and fights and wars.
Gangs was saying, this is my turf. So a lot of people was getting killed over turfs.
There have been more than 500 homicides so far in Chicago this year, far exceeding the number last year at this time.
As a member of an organization, Tony was a prime target for attacks.
If you guys get into war, it could be someone creeping in, lurking through the alleys, trying to come to your territory and catch someone not paying attention or catching relaxing, and boom, your life is over with.
At the height of the war between the black disciples and the gangster disciples, Tony was as familiar with gang territory markings as he was with the names of the streets in his neighborhood. Survival depended on it.
And each organization have signs, but they might have a couple signs listed with the organization. So, but you learn to they come to your turf, they come to your territory, and airbrush their little reflection, let them know, hey, we've been here. That's just pretty much let them know that, hey, we're in your area, be aware.
For Tony, every day was a battle just to stay alive. If
you're living on the edge, you gotta, at some point, something's gonna happen. At some point, it's gonna catch up with you. That's one thing. From what I experienced. At some point, if you're not doing the things the right way, you're living the wrong way. At some point, it's gonna catch up to you.
And in June 1996, when Tony should have been celebrating his high school graduation, his day finally came. He was grilling out with other members of the Black Disciples when a car full of rival gang members slowly pulled up.
Yeah, just at a park. People was out at a barbecue. Someone drove by, did drive-by shooting. Got shot twice, didn't even know about it until I got home.
A few minutes later, Tony came running through the door.
Yeah, I went home, walked in the house. Mom said, hey, your pants are wet. I turned around, blood all over the place.
Despite being shot in 2 different places, Tony survived the attack and avoided becoming one of the 796 homicides that would take place in Chicago that year. But later that summer, he was hit with a situation that he couldn't escape. Tony's older brother was arrested on drug charges and sentenced to prison.
Tony had to be about 16, 17 years old when his brother went to jail.
I just remember we all sitting down crying and, hurt, confused, don't have any money to bond him out. Just being lost.
Tony's brother going to prison left a void in the Davis household. And to bring everyone's spirits up, his mom Lolitha threw a party.
So I used to give parties on the weekends. I used to party in my basement, collect a little money on the side. And
how would you collect money?
You charge them at the door. You might charge them $1 at the door, maybe $2 at the door, $1 for a drink, stuff like that. And one time, one of the other gangster boys hauled off and slapped me. Tony got mad. We had a pistol in our house because we had to protect ourselves, you know what I'm saying? And Tony ran up there to get the pistol, and the guy ran out of the house, and Tony went chasing after him.
While Tony never found the guy, he assumed the role of man of the house and continued on with his street life. Later that summer, Tony was walking down a street in Englewood when his life was changed forever. It was a hot July night, and as Tony was nearing his house, a mob of guys emerged from the shadow and jumped Tony.
It was probably 10. It was a lot.
10 on 1.
Yeah. put me in full Nelson. And it was a very intense. I was pretty beat up, pretty bad.
Tony was helpless against 10 guys. And for minutes, the beating continued.
That was when I was really able to see the near-death experience. You know, you actually can see like your body's like going out of it. Because it's constantly pounding in your head, again, pounding. So it's like, you know, you really feel yourself go.
Tony was left laying on the street, bleeding and unconscious. After he didn't come home that night, his mom was relieved when the hospital called and said that Tony was alive. But when she entered his room, Lolita could hardly recognize Tony. His jaw had been broken in 5 places and was wired shut.
Man, I was in tears. Now, that's the time that my children seen me cry. I was really, really in tears to see my child hurt like that. You know what I'm saying? To see you try to protect your child and then somebody tries to hurt them. Yeah, it was a hurting feeling to see my baby like that. It was. That's just something, things you do, you don't never forget. His face was just so big and they had to wire his mouth down. Excuse me, God, I wanted that boy dead for what he did to my child. And I went out looking for him.
As Lolita searched for the man who had beaten up her son, Tony called his old friend, TJ Williams.
Tony called me. He would say, hey, come visit me in the hospital. Like, visit you? And why would I go to the hospital to visit you? Well, you just need to come visit me. Well, what happened? Well, I got beat up and they wired my mouth shut. I'm like, why does somebody beat you up, man? Tell me. So he was like, well, just come up here. And I wouldn't, because I was scared. I'd go up there and they see me going in the hospital, you know, just thinking like somebody randomly see me. That's his friend. Yeah, he got the money or whatever, you know. So then his girlfriend would call me back at the time. Hey, Tony wants you to tell Tony I can't come up there. You know, and I felt bad because he kept calling me. Hey, Tony, I can't come. Tell him I can't come. Tell him I see him when he gets out.
Weeks after the beating, Tony was still at St. Bernard's Hospital.
And when you're in the hospital afterwards, like, what are you thinking afterwards?
Oh man, thinking like this was probably this is my warning. I mean, what other warnings? You have had all these other, this is the last warning. What are you going to do?
Finally, 4 weeks after being admitted, in early August, Tony was released from St. Bernard's Hospital and returned to the family home in Englewood. His younger brother, Will, hadn't seen Tony since the beating.
And he came home, and I mean, his face was like a blowfish. Like, his face was so big. And I remember, like, we saying, hey, Tony, and like talking. He could only talk like from his bottom lip. He went inside the house. And when he went to the house, me and my brother went I think we were on the front porch, and we like was crying and we like held each other.
When most of his former teammates were heading off to college, Tony was at rock bottom.
I just remember him looking defeated a lot and being like, man, I can't believe that my jaw broken. I can't believe I'm in this situation and I got to drink from a straw. You know, he vocalized that a lot.
And so one day, he picked up the phone and called his old Harvey Twisters coach, Quint Harrell.
When he called me, I didn't even know it was him because his mouth was wired shut. And, so I was about to hang up the phone. And I could barely understand what he was saying. And then I thought somebody was making a prank call. And then I said, is this Tony? And he said, yeah. And I said, what's wrong with you? And then so as I listened closely, I realized that he had gotten jumped and his mouth was wired shut. I don't know exactly what happened, but all I know is when I talked to him, I say, you ready to make some changes? He's like, yeah. I say, okay, well, I'm gonna see if I can get you in school.
When Tony made that call to Coach Quint, he had been off the mats for over 13 months. And during that time, his old high school teammate, TJ Williams, had grown into the #1 recruit in the state. But academic issues were forcing TJ to go the junior college route. Most predicted that TJ would end up at Iowa Central Community College. Here's the head coach, Mark Ostrander.
TJ was supposed to come in on a flight. In those days, the school didn't give you recruiting budgets. So I paid for an airline ticket for TJ to come out and visit Iowa Central.
But TJ had a change of heart and committed to another college, leaving Coach Ostrander standing at the Des Moines airport with a letter of intent in hand.
So I was a little worried, a little ticked off.
He called Coach Quint in Chicago.
And I said, I need back then it would be a 134-pounder is what I was looking for. And do you have any kids out there that could, compete at junior college level? So anyway, Quentin says, well, there's a kid in Chicago. And I said, what's his name? And he said, Tony Davis. And I go, what if I drive out there Monday? Do you think we could find him? He goes, well, we can try. There's no guarantees. So I got up Monday morning at 6 a.m. and drove to Chicago. Somehow, we didn't have GPS back then. Somehow I found where the Harvey Twisters is, where Quentin was. Quentin was running practice. I watched his wrestling practice for maybe a half hour, and he goes, I know where Tony's grandma lives. I know that. Let's go over and see if she knows where Tony's living now.
Later that night, Tony was sitting at his house when he heard a knock on the door that would change everything.
That's when God sent me an angel.
It was Mark Ostrander.
Tony's mom comes to the door, and I walk into a house, sat down at the dining room table, and Tony was sitting there. But something didn't quite look right. He had a glass of water with a straw in it, and Tony kind of has his head down, and he kind of looks up at me, and his face is all swollen. And I introduced myself, and I said hi, and he just kind of shook his head. And then I could see that he had his mouth wired shut, so he couldn't talk. And so I said to his mom, what's going on? And she goes, well, he had got jumped by some gang members, so they beat him up, left him in a dumpster. So I sat down and I just basically started talking to Tony and his mom about Iowa Central, what we could do for him. And Tony doesn't say anything. We can't talk. So it was kind of an odd recruiting visit. I knew the mom was going to run the show.
For Tony's mom, this wasn't the first time that a wrestling coach had offered Tony a scholarship.
We talked, and then the coach came over. He said, well, look, I want to pay Tony to go to college. Really surprised me. I was like, don't get me wrong. This white man with this money, and I knew I wouldn't be able to get no matter how hard I tried, I knew I wouldn't be able to get my kid to college.
After an hour, Coach Ostrander left a letter of intent on Tony's table and drove back to Iowa. With the school year starting in 2 weeks, Tony had a choice. Stay in Englewood and return to the streets, or move to Iowa Central and give wrestling another shot.
I knew I had to go. I knew that was the calling, and I knew it was time for me to go. And I was exhausted. I was ready to look for something different. I was missing wrestling. So when that opportunity presented itself, I just took advantage of it. It was the best decision I ever made. That's when Tony Davis get his mojo back.
After he signed with Iowa Central, Tony got his GED, and in late August 1996, he hugged his mom and said goodbye to Englewood. He was headed 6 hours west to Iowa Central Community College. Thank you so much for listening to part 2 of Escape from Englewood. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. Be sure to check out part 3 to see how Tony does in JUCO and where he ends up. And if you want more content, please consider joining our fan club at patreon.com and search Wrestling Changed My Life. That's Patreon, Patreon.com, and search Wrestling Changed My Life. A special thank you to our sponsor, Spartan Combat, who's currently running a special on custom team apparel for the Freestyle and Greco season. Go to SpartanCombat.com to place your order. Escape from Englewood was written, directed, and edited by me, Ryan Warner. Story consulting by the great Raleigh Peterkin. Original score by Gary Linnelli. and business manager Tanner Warner. A final thank you to Tony Davis and everyone we interviewed for this project.